Okay, AP Psych students, this is Mrs. Sewell, and we're going to finish the last of Standard 2 today. One of the things that's frequently on the AP exam is the difference between an aptitude test and an achievement test. So you want to make sure you understand the difference. An aptitude test measures your ability or potential. It's going to be predictive of, how well you do on the test should predict how well you'll do at something else. That's an aptitude test. An achievement test is going to measure what you've learned. So when you take your AP exam at the end of this course, that will be an achievement test, and it's designed to measure how much do you know about AP psychology. An aptitude test, an example would be the ASVAB test. If you're going into the military, you would take an ASVAB, and that would indicate aptitude for particular jobs within the military. Your SAT is an aptitude test. And so you take the SAT, and it's supposed to be predictive of how well you would do when you go to college. However, keep in mind that men tend to do better on SATs, but women tend to do better with grades and things in college. So we have to think about, well, validity. What's the validity, or how reliable is this test at predicting what it's supposed to? And so we're going to talk about validity and reliability next. All right. A couple of things about intelligence tests. We talked yesterday about um, how it is normed. Okay. You also want to know it's norm reference. Sorry. You also want to know that it's standardized. And a standardized test has been piloted on similar populations. It's been standardized in a way that it's going to fall on that normal distribution. So that's what we talked about yesterday. The other part of standardization is that everybody who takes the test should get the same amount of time and the same directions and the same kind of testing conditions. That's part of standardization. So everybody has the same opportunity on the test. So one of the things when you take an AP exam, we have to be really particular about how we read the directions. That's why when you take different kinds of tests, SAT, PSAT, even your end of course exams, that we have to read the directions from the script verbatim so that everybody gets the same directions and so that there's no question. And also we have to be really careful about timing them to make sure that everybody gets the exact same amount of time. So there's a lot of things that go into standardization. And so a couple of other things that are important, especially with intelligence testing and really creating any kind of testing, is the idea of, is it reliable and is it valid? Is there validity to it? There's different kinds of reliability. Test, retest, and split halves are both methods of checking for reliability, making sure the test is reliable, and then different kinds of validity. There's content validity, there's construct validity, there's predictive validity, which is kind of what I was talking about with the SAT. So let's take a look. These two things, reliability and validity, are always on the AP exam, so it's important that you understand them. When you're making a good test, you're always going to check for reliability and validity. So these two kinds of things go hand in hand. But keep in mind, a test can be reliable. That means you reliably get the same result, but not valid. Okay. Hopefully, when you construct a test like an IQ test, your test is reliable and valid. And if your test is not reliable, then it cannot be valid. So those are the options that you're going to get. Think about this. If I step on the scale every day and it says I weigh 110 pounds, all right? So I step on the scale every day, 110 pounds, 110 pounds. Then that's reliable. It's measuring my weight, and every day I'm getting a consistent result. Reliability is all about consistency. However, I don't weigh 110 pounds. And so it's not valid because it's not really measuring my weight. It doesn't really measure what it's supposed to measure. So that's not a good test. Okay. If I step on the scale and it accurately reflects my weight and it does that, each time I step on it, well, then it's going to be reliable and um, and valid. Okay. If I step on there every time I get a different weight, it might be 70 pounds, it might be 110, it might be way higher. Well, then that scale is not reliable. It's not consistently giving me a result. It's not reliable. And if it's not reliable, then it's not valid either. So those are examples of reliability and validity kind of going together. All right, so to define it, so on your worksheet, on your graphic organizer, you want to be sure and get the definition of reliability. And all it is it's just the um, the ability of a test. It's whether the test gives consistent results over time, not over time like overtime. That should be two words. Consistently over time gives the same results. Okay, that's reliability. So you get consistent results. This shows two types. I'm going to give you another type as well. Two types of reliability. How do you check to make sure your test is reliable? Well, one way to do it is test, retest. Okay, so we're going to check for reliability. We give the test and then we give the test again. And so you compare the results. So, if I take the test, in August, and I haven't done anything to learn more, it's not like Bruno in yesterday's lecture. I haven't done anything to learn any more. So I take an IQ test, for instance. I can't really study for an IQ test. So I take an IQ test, and then later in the year, I take another IQ test. Well, I should get really similar results both times. And that's going to be an indicator that the IQ test is a reliable assessment of my intelligence quotient, my IQ. All right. Another way you can do it is called the split half. And a split half is where you take half the, divide the questions into two halves and then score those two halves and then compare. Okay, so if I take an IQ test with 200 questions, then I'm going to randomly pick 100 questions and randomly pick another, and then I'll have the remaining 100 questions, and then I'll score them for IQ and then compare the halves. They should give the same result. If they don't, then you have to look at, well, were questions on one part harder than questions on the other? And so, so you're going to split the test in half. So it's just what it says. I love when the psych words are what they say. Split half. I'm going to split the test in half, grade each half, and then see if they're consistent with each other. Another kind of reliability that's not on here is called inter-rater reliability. Inter-rater reliability is where you have more than one person score it and then check and compare their results. That's an inter-rater reliability. So if you take and do the FRQ and I grade it with a rubric and then Miss Mailer grades it with the same rubric, we should get very similar scores. If not, then what is the problem? Is there a problem with the rubric? What's happening? And so that's a way to check whether or not the test was reliable. So if we both are grading it, they do this all the time with FRQs in psych. They'll have, somebody they'll have the table readers grade it, and then somebody will spot check it and do comparisons, and they'll check each other as well. And so that's inter-rater reliability. That two people that score that test with the same rubric should come out with pretty much the same score on that test, and that means it's reliable. Okay, on the FRQ, or excuse me, on the Nearpod, you should go in and do um, the the questions here. I'm just making the video on the other half, okay? Then we go to validity. So validity is how accurate of a measurement is a particular assessment. So how accurate is the IQ test at measuring IQ, your intelligence quotient, okay? So how accurate is it, all right? And so there's different ways to check validity, okay? One is content validity. With content validity, so you're going to look at whether the measure of the measurement, so the test that you're giving, um, is testing what it claims to test. So if I tell you I'm going to give you a test on intelligence next Thursday, and you come in, you've studied for intelligence, and you look at the test, and it's a whole bunch of math problems and things you've not seen before, well, you're going to see from its face that that test lacks content validity. The questions aren't really designed to figure out what you know about intelligence, as far as psychology is concerned. And so it lacks content validity. You've often probably felt this. You've studied for a test, and then you go take the test and it's nothing like what you studied for. Well, does that test have content validity? Is it really measuring the standard or the skill or whatever the the test was designed to measure? And so then there's a question of validity. So the example here is if it's a test on American geography, and you're given questions about the geography of Asia, well, then it lacks content validity, because you're supposed to be it's supposed to be measuring your knowledge of American geography. So if there's Chinese geography questions on it, it lacks content validity. The next one is the one that I think gives students the most fit, and that's called construct validity. And a construct is like this amorphous concept, a hypothetical or some kind of theoretical idea. For us in psychology, it's like personality. What is personality? Well, or introversion. I guess that's a better measure, introversion rather than personality. But introversion, what is introversion? How do I design a test that validly measures whether or not you're introverted? All right. And so shyness, extroversion, any kind of thing that is measuring traits is often going to be a construct. It's not like I can measure your mathematical abilities or things like that. It's just a construct, some kind of theoretical idea. And so we want the test to have construct validity as well. Does it accurately test what it's supposed to test? And that always comes back to validity. Is it testing what it's supposed to test? If I'm giving you a test for introversion, and I'm asking you if you're depressed, if questions about depression or something, it's not accurately measuring introversion, right? And so you've got to make sure the test measures what it's supposed to test. The very last one for validity is predictive criterion. And this is the SAT example from earlier. Does it accurately predict or forecast? If you have to come up, define it, and you need a synonym, use forecast. It anticipates success on some other measure, okay? Again, this is where we come back to the SAT, all right? It's supposed to have predictive validity. It can say predictive criterion or predictive validity, same thing. It's supposed to have predictive validity for your success in college, right? So the higher your SAT scores, the more likely that you'll be successful in college. That's the thought behind it. Again, as I said, statistically, men perform better, white males specifically perform better on the SAT, all right? But when you look at performance in college, the actual performance in college, women perform better in college. They get better grades and they seem to have more success. So then you can question, and people do question, does the SAT have predictive validity? So we're all wrapped up and worried about these scores. Are they really predicting what they're supposed to? Because, remember, it's a measure of your, wait for it, aptitude. Okay, it's measuring your potential. So this whole idea of the score for the SAT is it's supposed to measure your potential. Well, if it's not valid, if it's not, it's giving women giving them more scores and not predicting their success, is it valid? So that's a big debate that we can definitely have, that should we be taking SAT scores? Do those numbers really matter? Do they have predictive validity? Okay, again, there's more practice questions for you in the Nearpod, so you're going to go through those, and then really that's it. Reliability and validity are really important, that you understand the concepts, and also that you understand the different kinds of